about the big picture, the overview, to talking with a couple people who actually have done what Liz and Chris were talking about, taking that leap and doing their own thing for a whole variety of reasons. First guest, on my right, your left, Julie Hancher. She is a 2006 alum of Penn State. Not one of ours. Alas, we can't claim her from Belisario. She was a poli-sci major. She's the co-founder and editor of a site called Green Philly, which is a news, but more importantly, and we'll talk about this, community site built around notions of environmentalism and sustainability in the Philadelphia region. Project launched in 2008, is expanded to include live events around the community, including, I think this is cool, an annual sustainability awards program. Next Thursday, which is, yeah. On my left, your right, Audrey Snyder, founder and publisher of Inside the Lions, an email newsletter focused on a subject near and dear to all our hearts, Penn State football. She's had an interesting couple of days. Even before she graduated in 2012, she was covering Penn State athletics for a variety of traditional publications, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, The Athletic, freelancing for USA Today, and others, and she has taught news and sports writing here at Belisario for nearly a decade. Please join me in welcoming them, and we'll start, I guess, with you about those interesting couple of days. We could talk about that for hours, but I'm more interested in sort of the origin story of Inside the Lions. You've covered Penn State athletics, and in particular football, for a long time. You're known throughout the journalism community as one of the people who has the closest tabs on this program. What made you decide to go off on your own?
Yeah, so appreciate you guys having us here. This is my second time I've been in this building. I was here in the summer and I was like, this is nothing like when I was an undergrad, so it's really cool to see you all in this space and kind of the interconnectedness of the ideas and the fact that you've got student newspaper and media all together, I think is really cool. Kind of how I did this. So this is my 15th season covering Penn State football, and I swear I'm not that old. But I started when I was a student, and I worked at the Collegian. So you kind of build your way up, and then I was at the Athletic for the last just about 7 years. And as many of you know, if you're in the journalism news industry, jobs are getting slashed left and right. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. So you have to kind of find your creative way. So my job was eliminated in April, and my thought process was, okay, do I want to go back and work for a traditional media outlet, or do I want to do something on my own? And I took the summer to think about it, which I highly recommend if ever you get a point in your life where you're like, I can take 3 to 4 months and just think and figure out what you want to do, what you like to do, what makes you happy, what makes you feel like your life's fulfilling. Figure that out. So I took the summer, did that, and I'm in the middle of a master's program online through the University of Tennessee for digital and strategic communications. So I've learned a lot of marketing and the value of getting in someone's inbox with digital marketing. So I decided to go to Substack, truly very last minute, late July, and it's a subscription website newsletter. So people sign up, they can come for a free trial, you can sign up, put your email in, and then you're getting blasted with my updates, which have been quite a few this week and will be. But I can tell you, coaching searches are really good for business, as I'm finding out. So yeah, it's just about being creative and finding ways to tap into your audience and figure out a platform to do that.
But not to be too harsh about it, but there was a certain necessity in your decision.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when your job is eliminated, you're kind of like, what do I want to do, right? Like, that's the other part of it. And I had opportunities to go work for traditional newspapers, media publications, and I said no, just because you do it long enough. I've survived many rounds of layoffs in this industry, and after getting caught in the last one, I thought, yeah, no, I'm going to bet on myself and just give it a year and see what happens. And a couple months into this thing, it is really, really, really promising.
We're going to come back to that in a minute. Julie, what's the origin story of Green Philly?
Yeah, so I'm the complete opposite of the traditional newsroom. So I was a Penn State political science major, The closest I got to journalism was being quoted in the Daily Collegian because my friend was on the staff a couple times. And my high school newspaper, I wrote for the Wilmington News Journal, updating about like our proms and football games and stuff. So I did not have a journalism background. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I studied abroad in London, loved it, really didn't want to leave Penn State. And then I got into a marketing position where I was creating, at the time, audio conferences, which were like the precursor to webinars. And I joined the softball team because, I'm social. And one of my coworkers told me that our employer was taking our recycling bins and throwing them into the trash cans. And I was like, this is Recyclegate 2008, Like, what am I gonna do? And the internet was ripe, WordPress was a thing. These two guys down the hall named Pete and Danny had a sports blog in Philly that had 100,000 views a month. And I'm like, if Pete and Danny can do it, I can totally do this. It can't be that hard. It is hard, as you probably have been hearing, but it just started with a passion project where we were just writing about sustainability. I was also a trained environmental person. Al Gore had just come out with The Inconvenient Truth. This is probably when you were all children. But at that point, it was just my curiosity of learning how to, one, learn about sustainability, talk about that information, and then also learning as we went. So fast forward to 2015, I was in a different marketing job. I was doing social media and digital marketing. So I'd be learning stuff at my full-time job and applying that to the website, vice versa. And then my car was totaled on the street in 2015. Luckily, I was not in it. And Geico called and they were like, we're gonna give you a check for $7,000 and $7,000. And I'm like, I don't have to just go buy another car and you reimburse me. They're like, no, we just give you a check. So I'm like, I hate my job. I was working for a mortgage company that had no soul. And basically I was like, I could either follow this passion and this thing that was growing and getting an interest. We just started our Sustain PHL Awards in 2016 for the first time. We had 300 people come out on an August, Thursday night to come celebrate local change makers. And someone's like, why aren't you doing that full time? That sounds like something that you are building already a community for. So basically it was figuring that out over the past 10 to 15 years, 17 years. And then really joining communities like Lion, which we are a member of, and really just trying to dig in deeper and get involved in Philly, journalism, and sustainability.
So you talk about launching as a passion project, but then figuring out how to turn it into a business. What were some of the key moments there? And in particular, I'm fascinated by the awards because that's not publishing at a community, that is celebrating a community. What role has that played in turning this into a business?
I've learned so many lessons. That's the short answer. But I think the moment of Sustain PHL, that idea came because Philly had all these awesome communities with, freelancers and just people that were celebrating different things. And there was a publication called Geekadelphia, and they had the Philly Geek Awards. They'd have 200 people dress up and go to this really nice event to celebrate their community, but they would invite other people. And I was like, I have no event planning experience, but someone needs to do this for the environment because I see all this really cool stories and talking to people and meeting people, just learning and building this, project that I had at the time. And I was like, I don't have event planning experience, but I need to do this. So I asked my friend, she gave me a $50,000 budget. I'm like, I have $0. So we literally got sponsors and bootstrapped it and just figured it out. So really, I think it was turning to people who knew what they were doing, asking my friend who was an event planner. I had built trust in that community because I was talking to people and meeting people without an agenda. Not that you can't have an agenda or have a business in mind, but really having that come together was really good. And I think too, especially right now, people want community and they want hope, and that's really how they keep on going, both in journalism and environmental sustainability. Those are two areas that I think are very challenging right now. So I think the one thing is looking to people who are doing great work and learning from each other. So that's, the synergy.
And the awards next week, flashing forward essentially a decade. How do those help you build audience, and how do those help you generate revenue?
Yes. So it's a snowball effect where, one, we have a public nomination process where anyone can nominate someone who they know who's doing good work in the environmental community. And I think with that, one, a lot of people know who we are and a lot of people do not. So it was that brand recognition of saying, hey, we have these really cool awards. Luckily, it's built a really nice reputation over the past, 9 years. So they have other people to validate that this is a thing that's important. And they come and it's we get dressed up. People have nicknamed it the Green Oscars. And then from the revenue side, it was building that sponsorship, but also people who have been honored also are so excited. They're like, we want to sponsor you, or like, we want to get involved with your work. So I think having like a product or something that is valuable to your audience that they would like, or not that they would like, because a lot of it is trial and error. You have to test, and I'm a marketing background, even though that was my major. But you have to like figure out what people want to do more of that, and listen to your audience. So those are all keys that you hear right now in journalism too, and it really just reflects the business and journalism journey.
Outstanding. Talk about how coaching searches are good for business.
Yeah.
What is the business? How do you take even a topic as popular as Penn State football, athletics in general, and how do you turn that into something that allows you to continue to eat?
For sure. I am a business first and foremost, right? And profitability is what you always hear about in any business. And so before I even started, when it's like my job got eliminated on a Friday, that Saturday I was having conversations with friends who had been in similar situations, who we had worked together at the Athletic before, who were having a lot of success on Substack. And these are people that, they're covering college football just like me, covering specific teams. They were put in a similar, exact spot as me. And I was like, okay, what did you do? So I remember my one buddy, Christian Capel, who runs Inside Mont Lake. He covers the Washington Huskies. And we'd worked together at the Athletic. And he's driving to cover spring practice. And him and I spent an hour. And he's like, okay, this is what I did. If you're thinking about it, here are the things I wish I would have known. Just in terms of meet with an accountant. Do you have to collect tax on a subscription newsletter? What are your price points? How did you establish those? And so literally within less than 24 hours of losing my job, my head is spinning for 20 different reasons. And so I kind of sat on that all summer, and I talked to some other people and said, okay, well, how did you come up with your price points? Why does it make sense? And so before I launched, I thought long and hard about it. And so it's $8 a month, $65 a year. And the cool thing on Substack is you have a third tier, which is a founding tier. And I said to my friends, I don't know, this doesn't really seem necessary, right? And they say, no, open the founding tier, because you will be surprised at how many people want to give you $120, $130 off the bat just to help, right? Because they want to build something and they trust you. And the other part of this is that I've always been behind a paywall. So getting people to want to pay for my content was something that they were used to. But still, it's scary, for sure. You're sitting there ready to hit that button, and in fact, I was so nervous about it that the goal was to launch August 1st. And July 31, I was like, I won't be able to sleep tonight if I don't do this. So let's just hit the button, make sure everything works, make sure Stripe is accepting payments, and all of that stuff is ironed out. But yeah, so you have to find ways, and you hit on it with building community. And so, I had a pretty good idea Saturday night, Sunday morning that Penn State was going to have a coaching change. So I had my story lined up, ready to go. Wrote it Saturday night, put it in the system. Had a couple details that I wanted to clarify with sources before it went live, and knew as soon as it happens, all right, I got to be able to confirm this quickly, because as I've known from my previous jobs, that's always been driven by data and metrics. You know what sells, right? And you know that breaking news sells, and it sells a lot. So news happens, have it confirmed within 30 seconds, story out. The other thing, you talk about trial and error. So I didn't have a plan for how to cover a coaching search, right? The whole thing was, I'm going to launch this season, maybe cover a national championship run, and that'll be good for business.
Woohoo!
Yeah, things have changed. So 2 o'clock Sunday, Penn State announced it. I confirm it. It's out on the site. I'm putting stuff out on social media. And you talk about like reporters' instincts and knowing your audience, building a community. My first thought was, let's do a live chat right now. People want to know my thoughts. They want to know who the candidates are. They want to know what the heck happened that Penn State got to this point. So immediately I launched a live chat and said, I'm booking 45 minutes, like setting aside 45 minutes, literally from 2:15 to 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon. And because I have the emails, you send the email blast out and say, hey, live chat starting right now. Come with your questions. And there's still that side of me that is very much like the shy, like you put the mailbag call out and you're like, what if nobody asks anything, right? I'm still very much like that. And so I put it out and right away everybody's buzzing and they have questions and what about this? And I was like, we're just doing literally a 45-minute rapid fire chat. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's where my head's at.
Almost
and it was fantastic.
It's an instant AMA.
It is, yes. And it's
How many people showed up?
Gosh, there were 149 replies when I looked and said, okay, I have other work to do. Like, we got to cut it now, right? And so that was right away. And so again, I'm doing this for a little bit more than 2 months, maybe 10 weeks. I have over 3,500 subscribers, and more than a third of those are paid subscribers, which is what keeps the lights on.
So just doing math in my head, which is always dangerous, a 1/3 of the 3,500, let's call it 1,000 to keep the math simple.
We're over 1,000,
at $8 a month or $65 a year. Is that sustainable?
Yes, it is very sustainable. When you look at it now, the interesting thing is how you forecast that out over a 12-month span, right? How many of your monthlies stay? This is why I say a coaching search is going to be really good because you're going to have interest. Also, and this has always been the thing in sports, the off season, what do you do? Well, I've always made the argument there really isn't an off season. With the transfer portal, there is year-round interest in the sport, but I will dip into some Penn State hockey features, some Penn State wrestling features, all things that I've done at my previous jobs, right? And so I feel like I'm equipped to have the data from my previous stops of, hey, this is what an audience wants, and so let's tap into that. But also understanding, like, okay, how do we make this work? How do we forecast it out? I'm traveling on the road for every away football game, just as if I did at my previous job, right?
You're leaving later today to go to
Iowa
City.
Yeah, lovely weekend in Iowa coming up. But, that's because it's important to be there. And that was my thing from the get-go with subscribers was, hey, your money, your subscription is literally backing me to do this job. And so that's been a really, really cool part of it. So kind of a unique, perfect storm, but I want to build a community of people and getting out in front of those. So before early last week, when we thought maybe this was just, a rough stretch in the schedule, Penn State would snap out of it. I had a virtual happy hour with my founding subscribers. And that was part of the thing of, hey, if you sign up for this top tier, you get to hang out with me once a month for a virtual happy hour, which most people will probably say it's definitely, you don't want to hang out with her. She's going to be boring. But they were awesome. And we chatted for an hour just about Penn State football and what I thought was going to happen. But again, I think as a journalism industry, we create so much of this is the reporter, this is the audience, and you talk down to them. And it's got to be a two-way street. And that's how I've always tried to approach it in a conversational way. And I say to, readers, fans, subscribers, if I'm at a game or I'm at a bar, come up and chat. This is the thing you love, and this is literally what keeps the lights on. Let's talk about it, right? And what do you want out of my coverage? And so this is very much giving them ownership of kind of what I do in some ways, too.
So I want to pick up on a couple threads that I've heard both here and from Liz and Chris earlier. I've heard words like community. I've heard phrases like, this is what I love. Look, I'm old. I grew up in an era when there was a separation between we as journalists and the audience. We wrote for them, but we published at them. And the idea of a virtual happy hour, or no, we're going to throw awards to celebrate the community. Some of my J school profs would have had a stroke at that idea. I'm also struck, I grew up in an era where traditional organizations tried to be most things to most people. You're not attempting to be the Inquirer. You're not attempting to be one of the big TV stations. You're just all about environmentalism and sustainability in that region. How does your audience react to that? Do they expect you to be the traditional arm's length journalist, or do they expect you to be, no, you're part of the community and working with them to try to make the community a better place?
Yeah, I want to get to that question in 1 second, but when you're asking about that, it's interesting you mentioned the Inquirer, because also when I started at Green Philly, there really wasn't climate reporters. That wasn't a thing. I mean, people barely said the words climate change. And there was also this really big disconnect with like media and pop culture. I was watching, I forget, like a TV show a week or so ago, and they were like, oh, climate change, it's cold outside. Or maybe it was Abbott Elementary or something. And I'm like, the fact they actually they're talking about climate change in the media is a huge change, which seems obvious, but it's interesting. But the Inquirer has an environmental reporter. They don't have a climate reporter. And there is a need to talk about that to create change. So I think at the ultimate goal of what we wanted to do, or what I wanted to do when we started Green Philly, was really say people can start small. They can make smaller changes. It also gets to large change over time that can help the climate crisis. So with our community, we don't just have the awards. We host events pretty much monthly. So we'll have, and there used to be more panel structures pre-COVID, BC, where, we'd have like a traditional 3 or 4 or 5 people talking about a topic. And, we'd have 50, 120 people on a Monday night coming to just learn from really cool experts, because we knew I would just chat to everyone before I started this officially. So it was just like, hey, do you want to come talk about XYZ? But now they're a lot more interactive. So for example, we had a green burial themed event at a local cemetery that has like a green burial section. They got to, part of that is like, basically it's like a landscape. It's not just like, you don't have traditional caskets. So they built like a native plant garden, which is part of the process. And then they were able to make bouquets out of the plants from the graveyard, which is super cool. It's funky. If you ever watch that show back in the day, 6 Feet Under, it definitely has a lot of references.
Oh, wait, a bouquet that came from Aunt Gladys's grave.
You don't know whose, because like they're not buried in a specific space, but yes, essentially like the gardener, he's fascinating. He like takes care of the plants and thinks about like how that benefits the whole ecosystems. So he was able to like cut the flowers and be like, all right, we're gonna make wildflower bouquets, because one, people are having fun, they're learning, and then they're also learning about the topic, which is like how to have a green burial. So I think when we can think creatively, and that's where like the trial and error comes in, and with our audience, I think ultimately it's interesting. Sometimes people ask me like, what is Green Philly's take on this? I'm like, well, Green Philly's journalism, so that's not an opinion, but I can tell you Julie's take, in my opinion here, if you want to know about data centers coming up potentially in Conshohocken. So yeah, I think people, and to your point too, it's like they want to ask questions, and my inbox is flooded with like, where do I recycle this thing? Because we used to get a lot of hits from that from SEO, and just a lot of questions. So I think that's like the audience, I think, expects more response from outlets now than, unfortunately, you go to J school, so maybe I need some of those lessons from, before, but.
So obviously, it's hard to find a community more passionate than fans of Penn State football. Do you find they expect you to have an opinion, a take, a point of view? How do you, as a traditionally trained journalist, how do you think about that and approach that?
100%. That was one of the biggest shifts for me, probably within the last 4 to 5 years. It's you're the beat writer, you present the facts, the information, and now you have to have an opinion, and people want your opinion, and understanding that they want to know what you think is super valuable. And I have a podcast as well, and so the podcast is not behind the paywall, which is also partially strategic because it gets you in front of a bigger audience and you can push your product that way. And then obviously you get the ad revenue from YouTube. So it's another revenue stream, which is another topic that I've always thought in this industry is if you can have multiple revenue streams, you're going to be better off because at some point, somebody's going to wake up in the journalism industry and say, hey, yeah, you don't have a job today. Because that's just unfortunately how it works. But yeah, I want to say to my audience, hey, this is what I know, this is what I think, and understanding that there's two different things between what I know and what I'm reporting on the record versus, hey, let's talk about what happens if Penn State, say, approaches Kalen DeBoer at Alabama for the coaching search, right? Like, let's have that conversation. And so you have to find ways to, one, know what your audience is talking about. Like, it can't be self-serving, right? It's what are they talking about? What are they most interested in? And then being their go-to source. And the other thing is, like, sure, Penn State fans are passionate, and there's a lot of them. There are also a lot of publications that cover Penn State, right? And to the point earlier about the Inquirer, well, part of my pitch when I was doing this was, hey, the two biggest papers in the state of Pennsylvania do not have full-time dedicated Penn State beat writers anymore. That is a massive shift from when I started covering this team. Your national publication was me at The Athletic. That job doesn't exist and it's not getting filled. So there are fewer and fewer outlets covering this team, which sounded crazy, especially in July and August when we thought it could be a national championship team. But it's funny. The people that didn't want to have full-time coverage back in June, July, August, guess whose inbox is getting blown up this week with, hey, can you help us out? Yeah, guess what that answer is?
So, last question from me, and then I want to open it up to the group. What in October do you know now that you wish you had known in June and July when you were thinking about this?
Just rip the Band-Aid off and do it. I was really hesitant about doing it because I was like, I don't know if it's going to work. What if it doesn't work? The really cool thing is you have to get okay and be okay with failing and say, you know what, maybe it doesn't work. But the thought that I had that was driving me crazy as I'm talking to these other companies was, what if this does work? It's going to bother me for the rest of my life if I never tried to see if I could capitalize on an audience. And the day I launched, somebody reached out to me and they said, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, it's going really, really well. And they said, this isn't one day. This is literally like the last 15 years of you doing this and grinding on this beat and building up an audience. So like enjoy it, celebrate it, but yeah, don't be afraid to fail because it's also super fun and rewarding to build something for yourself.
Beehive versus Substack.
I had that conversation down to the wire. I liked that more people were on Substack. I liked that there is a website component to it. But truth be told, I was actually ready to launch on a third platform and things you know and figure out at the very, very end. I was all ready to go on a platform called Ghost. The problem was they did not allow you to do annual and monthly subscriptions. You had to do one or the other. And here I am truly 2 days before, and originally when I wanted to launch, I have the site set, I'm in the CMS, everything's loaded, and I'm like, what do you mean this isn't an option? And they said, yeah, you'd have to hire a web developer, and I'm like, I don't have a month to hire a freelance web developer like the season's starting. So yeah, things you learn. I've already had conversations with people at Beehive. They've reached out and said, would you want to migrate? I don't know. That's something I have to kind of think about when you build the business out because Substack does take 10%, right? That's the other part of this. So you have 10% and then Stripe 3% for the credit card processing fees. So yeah, that's kind of the next thing I'm thinking about.
You're not 18 weeks into Green Philly. You're closer to 18 years. What do you know now that you wish you had known then?
So much. I mean, I think really the one thing that has been my North Star and really helped me for the past 17, almost 18 years has been always learning and curiosity. And no matter what your major is, I lived at Penn State, I could take so many different classes and going outside your comfort zone. So I think journalism is changing. I think especially with where like AI is going, and the last conversation, I love the theme of just starting your own platforms and really thinking of your personal brand. Because, you know, we started as like a blog because that was the hot thing in 2008. And we built a following, and then we became a journalism outlet and really, you know, had to figure out that. And I think still with the community and, you know, how we look now, we do have someone that was funny. You're talking about the social first creators, and our social media person on our team has that now where she's creating content, whether it's our stories and translating those to Instagram or just doing platform first things. So we think of our audience and then like how we deliver that information. But I think the constant learning, constant trying new things, going outside your comfort zone, because, you know, I was even thinking, you know, I had to lean into my network when I didn't really have one. And it was like my Penn State friends, so I knew, you know, 10 years beforehand, who were like now professional event planner, or, you know, and my finance friend was helping with my accounting. So I think just constantly learning, asking people for help when you don't know those things, and yeah, just getting started on building whatever you want to build and just trying something, I think is something I would love to know.
We're coming up on time, and I know some of you have to get to your next class, but questions from the audience. What have you heard here that interested you? Yes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly, it would certainly be harder. I don't think what I'm doing necessarily works if you haven't done the job before, I think. And I could be wrong. I think that it would be much harder to try and say, hey, people who maybe don't know me, aren't familiar with my work, pay for my product, right? I think that would be a different challenge that I have, where I could say, hey, here's what I've done, here's what we're gonna try and build here. But yeah, either way you do it, like it's scary. But I say this, and we've seen so much of this, especially in the sports space, where you get people that are really good at breaking down film and very analytical of athletics, of plays and players, and like those guys are having a lot of success too. The biggest college football platform, the biggest college football outlet on Substack right now is Split Zone Duo. And these guys do a podcast covering all college football. And I was on with them ahead of the Penn State Oregon game. And I was talking to them off air of like, okay, well, what have you guys found and what have you figured out, right? Because these are two guys that are just huge college football fans, but over time have built an audience. So I think there's a way to do that, but without having that experience, I certainly think it'd probably be harder to get people to pay.
So let me flip that around. You were the name brand, a name brand in Penn State athletics. When you started Green Philly, how well known were you in the community? What struggles did you have to build that credibility and awareness?
Oh, I was a nobody. I moved to Philadelphia in 2007. I grew up in Delaware County. And literally I was like, I don't really have friends because most of my friends either went to like New York or DC or were still in college. So it's just going to networking events and meeting people and trying to find, and I think just, you know, showing up literally physically at the events where people were talking about sustainable businesses, about green buildings in Philly. I mean, luckily it's a city that has like so many initiatives. And it was just getting coffee with people. And then I remember the funny thing is there was this woman who had a green roof company, and she was like, why are you meeting with me? Like, what do you want? And I was like, I don't know. And funny story, so fast forward like, 15 years, we're becoming a nonprofit as we speak. And she's one of our board members. And I'm like, do you remember like 15 years ago probably when I met with you and you asked me what I wanted and I didn't know? I'm like, isn't that funny that now I'm asking you and now like this is like basically the relationship but I mean, that was 15 years ago, right? Almost, when I'm thinking of how long I've been around. And I think too, just like, asking questions, publishing, keeping at it. I mean, it was just like my hobby just to, go learn about WordPress on the weekends, which, and all the fun stuff.
Thank you. Yes, Chris.
DraftKings. I don't think so, just because I don't get into the line in my coverage, but on our podcast, which DraftKings is a sponsor, we do get into it a little bit there. And I think absolutely people want to know predictions. Like I had somebody get mad at me the other day because I forget what my score prediction was, but they said like, your score prediction was terrible. And I said, literally, I put confidence with the pick on a scale of 1 to 10, this being a 4, being not confident because, you know, where this program was at. And this person was like mad about it. And I was like, literally, I am not telling you how to gamble. I'm not giving you advice. I think they just might have wanted to be mad at something, right? Not necessarily the line. But yeah, on the podcast, we talk about it, but in written content, I haven't gotten into it. But maybe I should. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so, just based off of the conversations I have, but it also goes back to, like, I'm not sure why people subscribe, right? Like, you think you have ideas, but yeah, there could be people for sure.
So let me rip off that. So your readers presumably are super fans of Penn State football, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Are there other segments, other groups of readers, you think?
I think a little bit. I mean, what I've always found doing this is that the wrestling audience is very niche. So you might get a little bit of that. You get a little bit of hockey, but what I've always found is it's the people want the broad human interest story for the other teams. They don't want game-by-game coverage. And I was super forward about this when I launched. And I said, I am not covering every hockey game. I'm not covering every basketball game. I'm not covering every wrestling match. I will cover everything for football because that's the bread and butter. And that's what audience has always dictated at any place that I've worked covering Penn State. So yeah, you find interesting ways to tap into it, or like, are there themes? For example, the idea of general managers in college sports. Men's basketball team has one here, women's basketball, football needs to have one, which is part of the reason why the previous coaching search, or why the search is happening now. So that's a theme. So I can present that as a story to readers of like, hey, here's how other general managers in college sports are operating. And so I'll get like some people who are like people from front office sports, or they're more interested in sports business. You'll get some of those people too.
Who's your audience, or audiences, plural?
Oh, we have a few. So we would have the sustainability curious. So someone who is Googling like how to recycle something in Philadelphia, where to get a free trash can. And they come to our website. And then if they really care about the topic and want to know more and want to take action because, you know, they feel helpless, climate change is this huge problem and I can't solve it myself, but how can I make small changes and hopefully lead to a larger change? So once people are interested like that, they tend to come to our events. So it's heavily female, very urban, meaning like probably 60% of people live in Philly, although a lot do live in the suburbs. A lot of people work in sustainability or want to, but they basically come to us because we're almost like the compass of like what's happening in sustainability around the region, who are the leaders, who are the community change makers, who are the nonprofits, what's the government doing, like the city. We have a whole civics track. Yeah, so it's everyone from like professionals to, I'd say like people who care, like, you know, 25 to 45-ish. And I think ultimately the common themes tend to be they care and want to see some positive change. I could go into analytics for hours, and listen to audiences, because that's what we learn at Lion, too, to drop a little plug.
Excellent. Well, we are at time. Some of our guests have to flee to go to godforsaken Iowa, where I lived for 10 years. I'll swap more stories when you're back. No, it's not. So please join me in thanking them for their time. Thank you for your questions. We're going to take a short break to allow people to get back and forth to classes. We'll be back here at 10:45. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you, guys.
Terrific.
Speaking of our personal brands, can I get a photo?
Yeah.